You're listening to 91 Reasons, a journey into the twisted landscape of pop culture. Keep your hands and arms inside the podcast at all times. And now, the voice, Jeff Tucker.
Hey, it's another episode of 91 Reasons. This is Jeff the Voice. Thanks for tuning in and checking out. I wanted to do a special thank you right now to all of my Patreon supporters who give the donation to the show, which is amazing. The show doesn't make a lot of money. Patreon goes right to the bottom line as far as podcast hosting and equipment and that kind of stuff. So I'm eternally grateful for anybody who ponies up their hard-earned money to support this show. So a heartfelt thank you to the following people. Mike Rumble, Handel Thistletop, Rob Alvey over at Theme Park Review, Jeremy, Tim Wilson, David Carrero, Jana McDowell, Colleen and Rustlin, Aldo and the gang at One Wing Angel, David Markland, Sean Marshall from Parks and Cons. If you're not listening to Parks and Cons or delving into their social media, amazing stuff that they put on social media, you are missing out. Parks and Cons is the go-to place for conventions and theme parks and events. They manage to seek out every little minor event, and you're like, how did I not hear about this? And then you write it down so you can go next year. Parks and Cons is amazing. They've been supporters of this show almost from day one. Their product is fantastic, what they do. It's a totally different kind of show, whereas 91 Reasons is personal stories and adventures and stuff. Theirs is, this is what's going on the con. This is why you should or shouldn't go, how to park. He does these amazing lead-ups. Sean does these amazing lead-ups to the big cons like Comic-Con, where he'll go to San Diego and scope out the parking situation, the changes, what's going up, and it's really incredible. It's so insightful that don't make a move in the convention circuit without Parks and Cons. How about Pat Winooski, who is slogging his way through college? How are things going, Patrick? And of course, Q11 TV, that's my good friend Robbie. He's the one who helped make the Don Berg cartoon, the ridiculous cartoon. So thanks to all my Patreon pledgers. This episode is directly sponsored by Michael Bondi, who has been a supporter way in the beginning. Couldn't do it without him. He's a good friend of the show, good friend, period. And I always apologize when I do Michael Bondi episodes because he tells me what movie he wants me to review, and then at some point I get to it, or I have to buy it or I have to find it. This one I got off eBay, but I was going to buy it anyway, so it's not a big deal. But great movie with a rich history and big significance and importance in my life, which seems odd, but we'll get to it. So thanks to Michael Bondi for sponsoring this episode of 91 Reasons, and let's journey to the jungles of New York, and let's romance the stone.
I'm getting out of this jungle dump. I'm fed up to here with this treasure hunt business. Yeah. Ira, you miserable worm, you lied to me. You said she was a city girl, out of her element. Just get her in the map and bring them back. Piece of cake. Piece of cake, my butt. What went wrong? I'll tell you what went wrong. First of all, guess who else is here? You're dead right, Solo. What? Secondly, she's got herself a partner. Like shooting holes and everything.
The minimum price for taking a stranded woman to a telephone is $400.
$375 in traveler's checks?
Not a deal.
That's just the beginning of what's going on down here. There's nothing you can say that'll make me go back into that hellhole. Don't bring that up, Ira. Ira, stop it! All right, I'll go back. But this time, you're coming with me.
I've always been one of those guys who stays for the credits of the movies. People do it now because Marvel always puts a scene at the end. I was doing it long before then because, for me, the people who make the movie behind the scenes are just as important as the people in front of the camera. And I was always a big fan of people who did props and makeup and special effects, especially. And here's the thing. Back in the day when I collected Star Wars cards in 1977, because there was nothing else to collect, the Star Wars cards had lots of images from the movie, but they were also very good about putting the people who built the models. They would put Joe Johnston on a trading card. They would put Richard Edlund on a trading card. They would have a trading card of the Dykstraflex camera. And I got into this stuff very early. I was very into special effects. And I'd always wanted to do it as a career until Jurassic Park sort of said, hey, unless you want to sit at a computer all day, special effects are pretty much dead. Model making is dead. There's still some of it that goes on, but it's not as prevalent as it used to be. But I got to have an appreciation for people who make the movies by staying for the credits. Who directs these things? Who writes these things? How are they connected? And even though I didn't see Romancing the Stone until long after on home video, because as a kid, this movie came out in 1984. 84 is a huge year for movies. So much variety. Go look at the summer lineup for 1984, and you'll be shocked at how many different movies came out. Sequels, new ones, genre picks. And Romancing the Stone came out, and I remember as a kid going, it's a ripoff of Raiders of the Lost Ark, but it stars a woman. And Michael Douglas is no Indiana Jones. And that's an easy mistake to make. Thankfully, moviegoers did not make that mistake. It was a pretty massive hit. Pretty good date movie. But here's the thing. I owe my entire fanhood past Star Wars to Romancing the Stone. To understand the importance of Romancing the Stone, let's go back to the 70s. We'll talk about a film called I Want to Hold Your Hand, which was written by Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale, produced by Steven Spielberg, and promptly bombed. Very few people have even heard of this movie. It's about a bunch of kids, Winnie Joe Sperber and Eddie Deason, who are hot to meet the Beatles prior to their first appearance on the Ed Sullivan Show. It makes amazing use of Beatles doubles and Beatles footage to fool you that the Beatles are actually in the movie, which they are not. It's a really clever movie. Then we have the movie that shook everything, and that's 1941, written by Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale, directed by Steven Spielberg, and Spielberg's biggest bomb, I think. BFG, the giant movie, was a pretty big bomb, but 41 was a movie that bombed early in his career, and if he hadn't, reset his filmmaking skills and getting a movie under budget and on time, Spielberg's career might have been over. Let's not underestimate the importance of 1941. It was supposed to be a huge hit, and it was a massive bomb. It didn't make any money at the box office. I have it here somewhere. I have tried to watch it. I've seen it a couple of times. I tried to watch it again to try to review it because I was in a mood to review like really bizarre movies. But it's hard to get through. It's not entertaining. It's boring. It does have John Belushi as the fighter pilot, one of the few bright spots to the movie. But it is not a movie I would recommend to anybody, especially like if you watch it on home video, because it's a wide movie, and those old home videos would do that pan and scan. It would make you sick watching it, which is, you don't want to get sick watching a movie that's already got a reputation for being bad. But that movie bombed. So Spielberg retreated to save space. He went and did Raiders of the Lost Ark. He did it, ahead of schedule, and under budget to prove that he could do it, to himself and to the studio. Because when they're trusting you with, at the time, $30 or $40 million, you want to deliver for that. I mean, nowadays movies are $300 million, so they're made by committee. Give me a break. They're totally different animals now. But if you bomb, you get put in movie jail, and you sometimes never get out. But 1941 bombed, and that was Zemeckis and Bob Gale who wrote that. So their next project that they wrote was a little film called Back to the Future. And they took it to Columbia, who had first look at it. Columbia passed. Basically, every studio passed. Universal passed because it wasn't dirty enough, and they were looking for the next Porky's. Disney passed because they could not get past the idea of a mother trying to hook up with her son. That part totally alienated the Disney audience. They said no, no, no. So Zemeckis and Gale worked on it for a few years, refining it and making it better, resubmitting it, being turned down again. And finally, Zemeckis said to Gale, look, you continue working on this. The next directing job that comes along, because he had made I Want to Hold Your Hand, which bombed, and Used Cars, which did okay, but wasn't, most people have never even heard of that movie. It's a pretty good movie, but nobody's ever heard of it. But Zemeckis said, the next viable script that comes along, I'm going to take it, and I'm going to direct it, and then if it's a hit, we'll have some bargaining power here in Hollywood. So the next script that fell on his desk was Romancing the Stone. He read it. He liked it. It was by a screenwriter named Linda Thomas. Now, nobody's heard of Linda Thomas, but at the time, Linda Thomas was the hottest screenwriter in Hollywood. She had worked her way up and written this script called Romancing the Stone, which everybody wanted to make. Zemeckis was the best choice to make it. He got Michael Douglas was attached to produce and star in it with Kathleen Turner. Now, let's switch over to Michael Douglas, who had come from television and had done very, very well in Streets of San Francisco, and had done some movies. He did China Syndrome. He did The Star Chamber. But he wasn't known as a big actor. He needed that movie. Now, this is a guy who had been a producer. And as a producer, he could have been a producer the rest of his career. When you're standing in the shadow of a guy, his dad, Kirk Douglas, it can be very intimidating to try to live up to that legend. Kirk freaking Douglas is your dad. The guy's so tough, he's not even dead yet. He's over 100. Kirk Douglas is a legend. So you can see where Michael Douglas was like, I got to, forge my own way ahead here. So he produced One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which won Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, and a huge, massive hit. But he was just a producer on it. So by the time the 80s come along, he's looking for that script. What's the script that's going to make Michael Douglas a big star? And Romancing the Stone was it. It has all the qualities that you look for in a screenplay. If you've never seen this movie, first off, I'm really jealous. It's a fantastic movie. It's really well done. It's not what you think. It subverts a lot of your expectations. And it's a very, very good movie. So Douglas is on board to produce and star. Kathleen Turner. Douglas brings in Danny DeVito, who was in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And, it's funny. Cuckoo's Nest had Christopher Lloyd, Jack Nicholson, Danny DeVito, and a lot of character actors. Even Brad Dourif is in it. There's another movie that not a lot of people have seen called Going South. I really recommend Going South. It's a cute little Western movie directed by Jack Nicholson, starring Danny DeVito, John Belushi, Christopher Lloyd, Mary Steenburgen. So in the movie, Christopher Lloyd is in love with Mary Steenburgen. So you can see where I would have a soft spot for it, because that would be echoed in Back to the Future 3. So Zemeckis and the company go off to make this movie. And Linda Thomas is riding high as the most sought-after screenwriter in Hollywood. But, are we waiting to see if this movie is going to be a big hit? It comes out, massive hit. Linda Thomas is the toast of the town. They greenlight a sequel almost immediately, Jewel of the Nile. And if you've seen Jewel of the Nile, it's a good movie. But it doesn't have the spark that Romancing the Stone has. There's something missing to Jewel of the Nile. It could be that the jewel is a guy and not a jewel. It could be that it's just different. The reason it's different screenwriter. And the reason Linda Thomas died in a car wreck on Malibu. Very tragic. She was young. She had a huge, massive career ahead of her. So the fact that she died so young, what a crime to lose who knows how many other movies she had waiting to come out. It really does suck that that something like that happened, It's never good when people die young, She was, I think, in her late 20s, early 30s, top of her game. She could have written 20 more movies, one after the other, and been paid really well for it. So, really tragic. But she did give us Romancing the Stone. So we can look at Romancing the Stone. Kathleen Turner plays Joan Wilder. Joan Wilder, a very successful romance novelist. And of course, to flip things, she's got no luck in romance. She's a cat lady. She lives in New York alone. She writes these books listening to music and crying, and then she delivers them to her publicist. There's a really interesting moment where, and remember, when you're watching a movie, every scene has to count. There's no extra scenes. It's in the movie for a reason. It's not there just to bide time. If it's there to bide time, you got a bad director. So watch the scene where Joan leaves her house. She's got the manuscript, and she's walking through the streets of New York, and all these peddlers are trying to sell her their wares. And she's timid. She makes up excuses, and you really get a feel for Joan as a character. She's timid. She writes instead of doing things. She'd rather sit in her house and imagine things that are amazing instead of going to do amazing things. And her publisher tries to, get her a date. They look at some men at a restaurant. It doesn't work out. And then we find out that Joan has a sister. I'm pretty sure Joan's sister is played by Zemeckis' wife. I'm not sure if they met before this movie or this is the movie that they met. But she's a great character actor. You've seen her in a million things. She's the therapist in all the Lethal Weapon movies. Great actress. So she does a lot of charity work too, I think. So we find out Joan has a sister. Joan's sister is in Colombia, where her husband has been murdered. And if that's not bad enough, her sister has been kidnapped by these goofy criminals. And in a plot similar to Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, Joan has been mailed a secret map. And they're trying to get that map by trading the life of Joan's sister, which in Indiana Jones, it's it's Indy's dad, and it's not a map. It's a map in the Holy Grail diary. It's very similar in plot. So they send this assassin ransacks her apartment, kills one of her neighbors, and never gets the map. Joan gets the map and flees to Colombia. And then the movie is we've gone from New York, the jungles of New York, to the jungles of Colombia. I watched this on Blu-ray. It's gorgeous. The transfer is beautiful. The green hills of Colombia are just beautiful on your TV screen. It's almost a travel log movie, for God's sake. Well, it turns out that the guy that ransacked her apartment, he's a government official in Colombia who's head of antiquities. He's also a general who can command an army, and whatever that map leads to, Romancing the Stone, whatever that map leads to, he's willing to kill for it. So Joan sets off to Cartagena to trade the map for her sister, except the assassin sends her on the wrong bus. The bus ends up in one of those remote, beautiful valleys and hits a Jeep that's been left parked in the road, and all these birds scatter. And it's funny. This is where the collision of the two worlds here, and all of the people on the bus they shrug. It happens every day in Colombia. They shrug, they get their bags, and they start walking down the road, leaving Joan alone with the guy that's sitting on the bus, who's we know is the bad guy. He pulls a gun on her and demands them the map. When suddenly we see a figure on the hill, and it's very Indiana Jones-esque. You know what they're going for, but it's not a ripoff, because when we finally meet Michael Douglas's character Jack Colton, he's not Indiana Jones. He's not a hero. He's just a guy trying to get through life. And how he's getting through life at this moment was he was smuggling parrots. It's the dumbest thing ever. It's a throwaway line. You have to really pay attention to figure out what's actually... It was his Jeep. So he scares off the assassin, not knowing that he's a government official. And him and Joan make a deal that he'll take Joan to a telephone in exchange for $375 in traveler's checks. So now we have the sequence where the jungle guy is leading the city girl through the jungle. She's got a suitcase. She's wearing high heels. She's not ready for any kind of jungle outing. We get the iconic scene where Kathleen Turner falls down a mudslide, and then Michael Douglas falls and lands with his head between her legs. It was in every advertisement for this movie. It's how the movie was sold. The movie was sold as an adult fantasy adventure romp. And here's the thing. They don't make these anymore. I know I say that a lot on this show. But in the case of Romancing the Stone, it may as well be from the 40s. They don't make these movies anymore. They don't make middle-age adventure movies for adults. Every movie now is, the Infinity War, the Spider-Man Homecoming. Now it's Ant-Man and Wasp Woman, Wasp Girl. Now, I love all those movies. But I also have a soft spot for movies that are outside of that superhero alien realm, where it's just normal people in exciting circumstances. And what Romancing the Stone is it's fish out of water. Joan is completely out of her element. She has to depend on Michael Douglas for everything. They're being pursued through the jungle by the general and his army. They're shooting. Joan swings on a jungle vine. Michael Douglas swings on a jungle vine. And then the movie does what a lot of movies today won't do. It slows down. We have a big action beat, and then it slows down. They find an airplane that was smuggling marijuana. It's got whiskey and these bundles of marijuana. So Joan and Jack sit down, they relax, they talk about the map, they get high, they get drunk. They don't get romantic yet, which is nice because they're holding that off on us. Joan is not ready to, fall into this guy's arms, and this guy's not ready to commit to her anyways. But the movie slows down long enough for us to get to know and really like these characters and really care about what's going to happen to them. Now, while all this is going on, the two bungling criminals that have kidnapped Joan's sister, one of them is Danny DeVito, and DeVito is being allowed. Now, DeVito was, again, he's a huge star from television. Michael Douglas from Streets of San Francisco. Danny DeVito from Taxi. I mean, he's Louis De Palma on Taxi. He'd won tons of Emmys. It's hard to even look at him and not think of Louis De Palma. But here he is in this movie playing a Louis De Palma-ish character. I mean, DeVito can only play one type of character. And not just because of the way you're typecast, not because of his talent. His talent is huge. He's so funny. He is so good in this role. And pay attention to how he talks to his cousin. Let me tell you, Ira, I'm going to get shot out here, Ira. This poor sap. The way he talks is so funny. There's a scene where he's in the police station and his wanted poster is on the wall. Like, it's just so funny. I give it up. Linda Thomas's script is so clever and so funny that it just keeps you engaged. It keeps you watching. It's an exciting movie, even when it slows down. So the next morning, everybody's after this map. Everybody's after whatever is at the end of it. And Joan and Jack end up at this small village where it looks like they're about to get killed. They go to a door where the guy's like, "Go away, we have no telephone here." And then Colton makes the happy mistake of calling her, it looks like you're out of luck, Joan Wilder. And the guy goes, "Joan Wilder?" And it's like he has all her books. So her being a successful author actually has a payoff in the middle of the movie. It's not like she goes, this is because in Jewel of the Nile, she has a couple of scenes where she's like, "This is like what I did in the book. So-and-so did this, and this is how we escape." And this is the opposite. The world is saying to Joan, "I know who you are. And because of who you are, I'm going to help you." So there's a great chase sequence with a leap over a river, and they finally make it to Cartagena with a little tease of the Devil's Fork on the map, that not only are they near Joan's sister and the trade-off, but they're also near whatever is at the end of that map. And again, the movie slows down a bit. When they get to this village, there's as always, there's a festival. There's always a festival going on. Watch any James Bond movie. There's always a traditional, whatever the ethnic festival is of that country going on. But what it gives us is, there's some funny stuff with DeVito and a very large woman. But again, the movie slows down. And we just have a moment with these two characters, and we can actually see them falling in love with each other. And that's the magic. That's the magic of the movies, folks. That's why we go to the movies. Yeah, we go to watch spaceships explode and superheroes save the day. But in the end, it's about two people making a connection, finding each other, and that moment when you realize they're going to really get together. And they look great in this sequence. There's fireworks and music. And watch how, or listen how, there's double layered music in this sequence where the festival music is going on, but then Alan Silvestri's score comes in to highlight the romance of the scene. It's very well done. Zemeckis at the top of his directing game, letting these actors live and breathe on the screen as real people. And then when it does cut to them in bed together, it's not a surprise. You get it. Because a lot of times in movies, they'll eliminate the falling in love part. You'll see a guy look at a girl, and then the immediate cut to like the apartment door flinging open and them passionately kissing up against the wall as the tie comes off and the dress gets unbuttoned. But we're missing the middle part. Why? How? And isn't that infinitely more interesting than, the sex act is just clinical. It's, it's fun to watch, I guess, but it's like, okay, they're going to have sex, but why are they having sex? Why are they together? Why is this a couple? And in Romancing the Stone, we get that. Jack Colton's a good guy who only wants to buy a boat and sail around the world. Joan Wilder is doing everything she can to save her sister. She's putting her life on the line for her sister. So the next day they decide to find the treasure, what's at the end of the map. That way, when they go to trade for her sister, they actually have something they can trade with. So then we get this really fun, and it's not long. It's not like this is the centerpiece of the movie, and there aren't booby traps or anything. All it is that Joan's sister's husband found something, hid it in the jungle, and drew a map to it. So when they find it, it's a bunny rabbit statue. And then she does do in one of the books, I did this. Then they break the statue, and there is the Jewel of the Nile. Excuse me. There's the stone in Romancing the Stone. It's a giant heart-shaped emerald, and heart of Corazon. And what's interesting is that I can't tell how they did it. I can't tell if it's a plastic stone or a resin stone with lights in it, or if it's an overlaid optical effect. Because every time they show it, it glows supernaturally. It's beautiful. You totally get while they're all into it. They don't have the stone more than 5 seconds before DeVito shows up and let's get out of here before Batman comes home, which is great because he's going to be the Penguin in 8 years from now. So there's a huge chase in the green of Columbia. Funny chase scene. They end up, the car they're in is floating down the river and then down a waterfall, and then they're on opposite sides of the river. It's all well done. And what's great is this is where the characters are allowed to show their mettle, to show their worth. We know that Joan is going to Cartagena. She's got the map. She's going to get her sister. We're not so sure about Jack Colton. He's done some underhanded stuff. He's made a copy of the map, which he never tells anybody about. It never comes up again. And when he says, I'll meet you in Cartagena, we're not certain if he's actually going to make it. And he's got the stone. So it allows us to have a little bit of ambiguity on the nature of this. It's when Han Solo leaves with all his money, and you don't know where he's going. You don't know it until he shows up at the end. You're all clear, kid. Then let's blow this thing and go home. Right? It's the scoundrel, the rogue, showing his worth, showing that he's worth trusting. So Jack exits for the movie for about 20, 30 minutes. And Joan is left on her own to make the switch with Ira. Now, Ira's been talking the whole movie about crocodiles. Look at those snappers. And we're shown a lot of crocodiles. So we know the crocodiles are going to figure in it somehow. So eventually, she gets her sister back. There's a nice reunion. Ira gets the map, which he thinks will lead to the stone. And then the general and the army guys show up, and all hell breaks loose because Jack Colton finally shows back up with the stone. He gives the stone to Joan. He gives the stone to the general. And while he's holding it, a crocodile rears up and bites his freaking hand off. It is such a good payoff for the crocodiles being in the movie. Look at those snappers. So then, what's great is we have, forget the gruesomeness of the hand being chopped off. What we have now is we have a gunfight between the Army of Columbia, the bad guys, Ira and DeVito, Jack and Joan and her sister. All the while, everybody's keeping an eye on the crocodile who has the stone and is walking away. It's artfully done. It's at times exciting, at times funny, and ends exactly where you want it to end. It ends with Joan fighting the general and him getting the upper hand. Jack is holding the crocodile by its tail as it's about to jump into the water and, probably vanish without a sight, and we'll never know where the stone went. And Jack has to make a choice. Does he let it go and save Joan? He has to decide what's more important here. And what's great is he lets the crocodile go, but Joan saves herself. So everybody gets a moment. Joan does not need saving by Jack. Jack has shown he's willing to sacrifice for Joan, but it didn't work anyways. So in the end, Jack says he has to go, and he leaves her. He does a Jack Sparrow by jumping off the turret into the water. And then we cut to back home. Then we cut to New York, where Joan's publisher is reading a book she's written. It's not the book from the beginning of the movie, but a book of these adventures, of her meeting. She has a hero in her book, and Jesse. And he's always shown in shadow in the really fun opening sequence. And Joan's been looking for Jesse her whole life. And she found him in Jack Colton, and he left her. And the publisher does a really funny thing where she says, it's so exciting how Jesse meets her at the airport. And you're like, yeah, but that didn't happen. That's wishful thinking. But Joan's okay, because the movie wasn't about Joan finding a man. The movie was about Joan finding herself, finding that writer within her that's willing to live out the adventures that she only has been writing about. And we know how the movie's going to end, but it doesn't detract from the fact that Joan has saved herself in addition to saving her sister. So watch the scene where Joan's going to her apartment. The vendors are back, and she just walks through them. She doesn't offer any flimsy excuses. She's a new person. And the movie could end there, but instead we see a giant boat that looks just like the one Jack Colton wanted, parked in the street, and there he is, and he's got a pair of crocodile skin boots because he found the croc and got the stone and did whatever, sold it or whatever. Romancing the Stone is a great movie. It has a lot of Zemeckis trademarks in it. The number one is that Zemeckis is always trying to tell you the story visually, not through dialogue. The opening sequence through Joan's apartment is almost exactly like the one we would see in Doc's lab in 1985, where we're looking at clocks and we're looking at newspaper clippings, Doc Brown's mansion destroyed, Joan Wilder, writer of the year. It's all very Zemeckis-esque. We totally get it. Romancing the Stone was like I said, a massive hit. A sequel was greenlit almost immediately, came out the next summer. How about that? You only had to wait a year for the sequel to Romancing the Stone. Zemeckis wasn't involved. He was too busy making Back to the Future. When he got all that clout back for his hit, Romancing the Stone, every studio said, you could make any movie you want. You have a blank check. And Zemeckis went back to Spielberg and said, you always had faith in the picture, so we want to make Back to the Future with you. That was the right decision. Back to the Future would go on to be the number one movie of 1985. I'm not sure where Romancing the Stone fell, but it was a high enough gross that everybody came out a winner. Michael Douglas became a bona fide movie star with hit after hit after hit. He would go on to almost nearly own the 1980s with movies like Fatal Attraction and Wall Street. I mean, these are massive. Not only are they massive movie hits, but they're pop culture markers. Fatal Attraction opened up an entire dialogue about cheating. Wall Street opened up an entire dialogue about making money and greed is good. Michael Douglas, huge, massive movie star. Kathleen Turner was already a big star by the time Romancing the Stone hit, and she went on to do Jewel of the Nile with DeVito and Michael Douglas, and then they would finish out their trilogy of movies together with the non-related War of the Roses in 1989. Not an adventure movie, but maybe one of the blackest comedies I have ever seen. A dark comedy about divorce with DeVito playing the lawyer, where he looks at the camera and goes, "We're making a love story." But no, Romancing the Stone was great. I'm glad I discovered it on home video when I was a teenager. It holds up even to this day. The only thing I would give it is that some of the music comes off as almost elevator music. That's not the fault of the filmmakers. That was the style of the time. It does come off a little bit dated, but that doesn't detract from how much fun the movie is. It's an adventure movie for adults. Imagine that. An adventure movie made for somebody over 12. That's fantastic in my book. We'll probably never get a movie like that again. You know, Michael Douglas, even though he still acts. Kathleen Turner has almost retired. She was last seen in the Dumb and Dumber sequel, the real sequel, where I remember seeing it and going, I think that's Kathleen Turner. You know, but she went on after this to do Peggy Sue Got Married. Have you ever seen that movie? That's a great movie. That's kind of a weird Back to the Future style movie about a woman who gets hit on the head and wakes up back in high school. But no, I highly recommend Romancing the Stone. You already knew that. You know it's a big hit. You know it's a movie that should be in your collection. I have the Blu-ray. I just watched it a couple days ago to bone up for this episode. So I'd like to thank Michael Bondi for his support of 91 Reasons. We couldn't do the show without you, my friend. I'm sorry these reviews are so far and few in between. You know how life gets. I have episodes already in the chamber ready to be released, but we'll get this one out quick because I owe Michael a review. So he always picks great movies to review. This one is no different. If you'd like to support us on Patreon, go to patreon.com and search 91 Reasons. You can support the show every dollar. I mean, just $1. You can support us with $1. Every dollar helps. But if you want to review, you want me to review a movie that you pick, there is one of those tiers on there. You can check it out. We want to thank everybody for supporting the show. We'll be at Midsummer Scream this late summer. We cannot wait to go. It's our favorite convention of the year. I just made plans for my Comic-Con parking. What a nightmare. Comic-Con's not fun anymore. It used to be a lot of fun, but it's not much fun anymore. So that's a bummer. But I am holding out. I did submit the Back to the Future panel for Comic-Con. I'm waiting to hear back if we've been chosen or not. So fingers crossed, huh? This Sunday, May 20th, I will be at the Gamble House in Pasadena. The Gamble House is the house used for Doc Brown's house in the Back to the Future movies. And they're having it's usually open as a museum, but they are doing something different this time. They are actually going to have a Doc Brown impersonator at home, so you can take your picture with Doc in his house. They're serving refreshments. It's part of a museum awareness program. That is May 20th, Sunday, May 20th, at the Gamble House in Pasadena. I can't wait to check it out and have fun there. We'll see you there at the Gamble House, right? In Back to the Future. Romancing the Stone, directed by Robert Zemeckis, is a fantastic movie. Thanks again to Michael Bondi. I am Jeff Tucker, and the show is 91 Reasons.
Thanks for listening to 91 Reasons. Please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes. Find us on Facebook. Is anyone even still listening?
So why don't you make like a tree and get out of here?